Hi everyone, and welcome to Windrider Farm. In today's video I'm taking you inside the tomato greenhouse here on our homestead and showing you an experiment that we're performing on our tomato plants. What you see in front of you is 96 tomato plants, and what our experiment is to see how many of the rules we can break with growing these tomato plants. What I'm trying to do is to break every single rule that I have ever heard or read about how to grow tomato plants. And one of the first ways that I broke the rule is by what is inside these boxes. So some of you might be thinking, that's just crazy. She's growing tomatoes in pine shavings, and the answer is yes. What I want to see is if everything that I've ever heard about how the breakdown of pine shavings will start to rob nutrients from the soil, what I want to find out is how much of that is true, how quickly it happens, and if there's any way that I can negate that by adding fertilization. The second way in which I'm breaking all the rules is by how densely I've decided to plant these tomato plants. Now, everything we've ever heard tells us that we're supposed to be planting these tomato plants 2 feet apart, 3 feet apart, but at the bare minimum, 18 inches apart. And as you can see, some of these tomato plants are a foot apart or 5 to 6 inches apart. In this particular bed right here, as with the other ones, I have 16 tomato plants in each one of these beds. 16. And there's 6 beds for a total of 96 tomato plants. The way that I'm compensating for planting these so closely is by removing most of the lower leaves, and I will continue to do this throughout the season. The next way in which I'm breaking all the rules is by where they're planted. These 96 tomato plants have been planted in a greenhouse that receives only about 6 to 8 hours of diffuse light, not direct sunlight. This greenhouse was built at the edge of a cliff where our house sits on our homestead, and I'll bring you to the edge. And there's the edge of the cliff. So the only sunlight that these tomato plants receive is from the eastern side and the southern side. And for most of the day, because of the trees that surround it, they're shaded. So let's see what's happening to these tomato plants that have been in these boxes for 2 weeks. Let's see how much they're getting stressed, or not. So most of these tomato plants are already starting to put out buds to make fruit. Just a little background on these tomato plants. For those of you who watched some of our previous videos, these were the tomato plants that were in a previous video entitled How to Fix Leggy Tomato Plants. These were all leggy tomato plants that were stressed when they were in the nursery, and I purchased them and brought them home. So they're planted in pine shavings with compost on top. They're anywhere from 6 to 12 inches apart. They're in a greenhouse with diffuse light, and they're all putting out buds. Now, some of you seasoned tomato growers may say, well, they're putting out buds, but that doesn't mean you're going to be getting any fruit. Well, let me show you. So we've had buds, we have flowers, and we have fruit. So some of you may be asking, why would you do this? If you've been successful growing tomatoes in the field, or in the greenhouse here last year in buckets, Why would you do something like this? Why would you take the chance with all of your tomato plants and fail? I wanted to find out how much I've heard and read about growing tomatoes was actually true, and how far I could push the envelope. Now, we've been having some very unusual weather this year. A little over a week ago, the nights here in the Northeast were in the low 40s. That's unusual for almost the end of June. Today, we're starting a heat wave, and temperatures are supposed to be above 95 degrees. So with these wild swings in temperature, I started thinking. So what I wanted to find out was how adaptable tomato plants are. Adaptable to what I'm growing them in, which is half pine shavings. Adaptable to how close I'm planting them. Adaptable to the low light I'm subjecting them to. And adaptable to the cold and hot temperatures that the weather is subjecting them to. So my question is, how much they were going to be affected by what I was subjecting them to, and what the weather was subjecting them to, and how much I could compensate for what I was doing to them, and what the climate was doing to them. So this will be an ongoing experiment, which will be taking place over the next 3 months of our remaining growing season. What I'd like to find out is their overall health, how much fruit they produce, and how long they're able to maintain their health and production of fruit given what I'm subjecting them to. So thank you for joining us today and letting us show you our little experiment. We'll be uploading more videos throughout the season to let you know how this experiment is progressing.